December 13th, 1945, in Hamelin, Germany. Justice found its place in a small, austere courtroom. Among the accused war criminals awaiting their fate was Irma Grese, known as the Bitch of Auschwitz, one of the most ruthless female figures of the Holocaust. Her story is that of a young woman who, at just 22 years old, became a symbol of cruelty, abuse, and complicity in the Nazi extermination machinery. Her end would be as brutal as the acts that made her feared by millions. Irma Grese was born on October 7, 1923, in Rechen, a small village in the Pomerania region. Her childhood was marked by absence and disorder. Her mother died when she was still a child, and her father, a distant and alcoholic man, failed to provide her with guidance or affection. She was raised by her grandmother, who tried to give her discipline, but the emotional voids and the harshness of her environment molded in Irma a mix of rebellion and a need to control others. As a teenager, Irma left school and worked in domestic tasks and on small farms. She felt insignificant and small, and she looked for ways to assert her authority, a desire that would find a terrifying outlet in the ranks of the Nazi Party and its auxiliary organizations. At 18, she joined the Hitler Youth and was soon recruited by the female Schutzstaffel, the SS, becoming a guard in the concentration camps. Her training was rapid and ruthless, rigorous physical training, ideological indoctrination, and the instruction that obedience was superior to morality. In 1941, Irma was assigned to Ravensbrück, an exclusively female concentration camp. There, she began to develop the reputation that would follow her forever. She supervised the prisoners with extreme severity, using whips and physical punishments. However, her transfer to Auschwitz in 1942 would mark the darkest stage of her career. Auschwitz was not just a concentration camp. It was a place where death had become routine, systematic, and merciless. Grese became one of the most feared guards, both for her authority and her brutality. Survivors' chronicles describe Irma as a small but fierce figure, with piercing eyes that seemed to enjoy the fear she inspired. She walked through the barracks with a whip in hand, punishing prisoners for insignificant infractions, sometimes simply for fun. Trial reports revealed terrifying episodes: women hung by their hair, prisoners beaten until they bled, subjected to public humiliations and sexual abuse. Her violence knew no limits, and it often seemed she sought to reaffirm a power that compensated for her insecurities. Despite her youth, her rise within the SS hierarchy was rapid. She was promoted to Aufseherin, a supervisor, a position that granted her direct authority over the inmates and close access to higher-ranking officers. Her name appeared on records for selections for forced labor and deportations to the gas chambers. She was aware that every signature, every order, every blow contributed to the systematic death of thousands of people. Yet, the trial evidence showed she did it with enthusiasm, never with doubt. Irma's downfall began with the liberation of the camps by Allied forces in 1945. After Germany's defeat, she was arrested by British forces and brought to trial in the Ravensbrück court as part of the Belsen trials, which judged the crimes committed at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. The charges were overwhelming: torture, murder, complicity in genocide, and extreme cruelty against defenseless prisoners. The defense Irma presented was limited and almost childish. She admitted being in the camps, she admitted witnessing the atrocities, but she tried to distance herself from her personal role in the abuses. She claimed she was only following orders, an argument the judges immediately rejected. The survivors' testimonies were heartbreaking. Women who had endured hunger, disease, and torture described Irma as merciless, enjoying the pain she inflicted. One prisoner recalled how Irma beat her for hours until she lost consciousness for the simple act of asking for water. Another recounted how the young officer selected inmates for the gas chamber, smiling as she marked who would live and who would die. Each testimony reinforced the image of a small, young, seemingly fragile woman who had embodied horror in its most human and tangible form. The verdict came on December 13, 1945. Irma Grese was sentenced to death for her crimes, along with other camp officers and guards. The sentence was hanging, a punishment intended to show that even women could be responsible for genocide and torture. There would be no privilege for age or gender. Justice, though delayed, was relentless. The execution was scheduled in Hamelin, in the prison where other similar sentences had been carried out. The man in charge was, once again, Sergeant John C. Woods, known for his deliberately brutal method. Woods's technique was neither quick nor compassionate. He sought to prolong the agony, ensuring the condemned experienced a reflection of the suffering they themselves had inflicted. The gallows were designed with narrow trapdoors, calculated to prevent the neck from breaking immediately and to make the asphyxiation slow and painful. In the early hours of December 13th, Irma Grese was led to the execution chamber. She wore the grey prisoner's uniform and walked with her head high, showing a mix of pride and fear that could only be perceived in her trembling youth. Some witnesses noted her hands shook as she gripped the railing, but her face maintained an air of defiance. She climbed the steps of the scaffold with determination, as if accepting that death was the only way out of the nightmare she herself had helped to create. Before the noose was placed around her neck, Irma made one last gesture. She looked towards the victim's relatives present in the room, though she did not utter a word. Some interpreted that look as a moment of remorse, others as a silent affirmation of her indifference. The gallows were ready, the trapdoor prepared, and the executioner lifted the bar holding the platform. As the trapdoor opened, Irma's body fell. The rope did not break her neck. She began to convulse, her legs thrashed, her torso arched, and her face turned red and then purple. Her hands clenched in a gesture of desperation as she tried to draw breath that would never come. For 20 endless minutes, the young officer's body moved in spasms, a terrifying spectacle that reflected the brutality she had administered throughout her career in the camps. The crucifix she wore fell to the floor and slid between the planks of the scaffold. No prayer, no plea helped to mitigate the pain. The rope tightened slowly, and every second prolonged the agony, until finally, at 1:45 in the morning, Irma Grese stopped moving. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the whispers of the witnesses, held breaths, and the weight of history observing the end of a life dedicated to horror. Her body was removed and taken to the morgue. As with other executed prisoners, she was cremated in Munich, and her ashes were scattered in the Isar River, ensuring there would be no place of worship or memory for one of the most merciless female figures of Nazi Germany. There was no funeral, no anthem, no respect, only the memory of her crimes and the silent warning of what happens when power and cruelty combine without limits or conscience. The story of Irma Grese is a chilling reminder that evil has no gender. The young woman who started as a lost adolescent in a fragmented Germany became an executor of terror, a woman who learned to love control and the pain of others, and whose life ended hanging from a rope designed to prolong her suffering. Her brutal end was more than a punishment. It was the confirmation that even youth can be corrupted to the darkest extremes, and that justice, though delayed and imperfect, can find its way. The legend of Irma Grese survived her death, not as a symbol of heroism, but as a testimony to the horror that humans are capable of inflicting when hatred and blind obedience mix. The bitch of Auschwitz died exactly as she had lived, small, seemingly fragile, but with a devastating impact on the lives of millions. Her 20-minute agony hanging from the rope was a reflection of the years of torture she herself had administered. A brutal end etched into historical memory forever. But this is part of our world history. If you like the information, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to see more content like this. Give us a like and comment on what you want our next video to be. See you soon.